All right, welcome to week 3. This week, this is what it looks like. Here you are in a live session. On Thursday, you're going to post your work in progress for this week's project, which is a brand identity package. You're going to complete a peer review, and then you're going to have a chance to incorporate all that feedback and finish up by Sunday. Compared to some of the other weeks, this may seem a little easier, I hope.
Last week's was a bit spread out. A lot of the stuff was very difficult to relate to each other at first.
Well, it's all the process, the logo process, right?
Yeah, it's very formal. I'm not used to the formality of it all.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this week, identity packages and color palette. So this is what you're going to be building. You're going to do some business cards, letterhead, and envelope. In the world of graphic design, we call this an identity package. This is sort of a standard identity group of things that you would create for a design. Nowadays, letterhead is less printed and more digital. Business cards are still being used by lots of people, and envelopes have their purpose as well. So it gives you a chance to sort of take your logo to the next level, and at the same time develop a color palette that's going to work for your brand.
Was this a student example? The
Yes.
Zinnia T?
Yeah.
Really, I'm just admiring it. It's really well done.
This is Marias. Yeah, so I'll go through all the elements of this through the lecture. When we talk about identity, it can mean a lot of things. So an identity package is real specific like that in the world of graphic design, but it can also include anything that expresses a company's brand. So, you know, the blue polo and the yellow logo, that's part of identity. The way people answer the phone, how the trucks are painted, you know, wrapped, how people greet you, whether they greet you at the door, that's all part of identity. It can really be all encompassing. If you think about it, it's like brand is kind of your idea, and core identity is how the idea gets expressed, how people experience it. Here's an example. This is from Pentagram. This is work of Michael Bierut, and this is Bobby's Burger Palace. And you can see the logo is obviously a metaphor, visual metaphor for a burger.
That's really well done. The color palette too.
Yeah, so the color palette plays out in the location, in the decor, on the signage, in all the printed materials, and on the business card. And when you have this kind of color palette carrying throughout all these elements, it creates a sense of consistency. And consistency is the hallmark of a good brand. Here's another one. This company, here's a billboard, a printed piece, presentation graphics, some banners, and signage. Now, these are all different elements with different purposes and different copy on them, but they have something connecting them, right? It's like what I would call a family resemblance. What do you think expresses that family resemblance here?
Maybe the color scheme, the motif.
Yeah, so it's more than just the colors, as you're saying, Dan. It's like the gradients. Using these soft gradients, and then having these sort of shapes like this, and then breaking them up with white shapes in front, it starts to create a visual language. So even though these things are completely different purposes, they start to feel like they're all part of one voice. And that's kind of what you're trying to accomplish when you create an identity package. Here's another one. This is Bespoke Trading Company. So this uses a different language. This has a very muted color palette, but there's textures, paper, the craft paper, this cotton string. It starts to tell you something about the brand, right? There's no foil here. It's all kind of natural.
Down to earth and kind of wholesome.
Yes. The type style is a bit retro, and instead of using black, they're using sort of a soft gray. So it has this kind of natural feeling to it. So this is the kind of thing you're going to develop in your identity package. What is the feeling of your brand? If you think of your brand as a person, it kind of helps, you know. So different brands have different people. Martha Stewart is an amazing woman in charge of $1 billion media company, but she still comes across as the neighbor who makes cupcakes. But having a consistent identity is the key to success. As you work on these pieces, you're going to explore different areas, visual areas. So first, think about nature. Are there natural elements? Does that make sense for your product? Are there things that you could bring in to use as other visuals other than your logo? Texture, so stone, wood, a speckled look or something, you know, rough concrete. Maybe there's a kind of texture that matches your brand. Patterns, which are so fun to build in Illustrator. So you can use patterns as an additional element to create texture on some of your pieces. Paper texture, you can simulate paper texture by getting photos of paper and using those in your pieces. And then there's other graphic elements. As you developed your logo, you may have had elements that didn't make it as a logo, but could become a secondary element. And then color, of course. And of course, you can use gradients. You can use any colors you want that complement your assigned color and work well with your identity package. So let's look at some more examples. So this is another Michael Bierut project, Lucy's Fried Chicken. This is a word mark, but it's really crafted quite well. What's your feeling about Lucy's Fried Chicken? What kind of brand is it? Would you eat there?
Kind of seems almost like a diner quality, like somewhere you'd go to kind of enjoy a nice meal.
Yeah, it doesn't have white tablecloths and fine wine, but it might be really good.
Exactly.
Does everybody else agree?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. While I'm presenting, I can't see the chat window.
That's kind of a flaw in this program, I think.
Yeah, well, I probably could figure it out, but I'm still working on that. So here's the neon sign. Does it change your viewpoint on Lucy's?
A little bit.
That's just excellent. That's just excellent.
What,
also, I bet that's expensive as hell as a sign.
Yeah, because it moves.
Yeah.
What keywords we can associate with this brand now? If you were going to make a list of keywords.
I mean, one we'd have to use is sexy. Kind of that kind of brand.
I'm sorry. So that was
racy.
Yeah,
you said
Sharon. Yeah. Is that supposed to be an egg she's sitting on?
Yes.
and I'm pretty sure she's only in an apron and a garter. I think that's an apron.
So she cooks the chicken.
Is this a real place?
Yes. So
holy shit.
I would say it has a retro feeling. It has a bit of hedonistic feeling, which means it's kind of indulgent in a way. It's kind of like it's
like one of those tattoo ladies, you know, that you get on your arm or whatever.
Yeah,
the pinups. Yeah,
she looks like a pinup from the 1940s. So she's not like erotic. It's not like Hooters or something.
No.
It's a little more fun and playful, right?
Yeah.
It's like calendar classic, like a pinup of something you'd see in the 50s. I mean, minus the drumstick, maybe.
Right. So
the drumstick is awesome.
If you think about this, these associations, right? They make sense for a fried chicken restaurant because fried chicken is not health food. So you're being a little sinful, a little hedonistic. It's fun. It's retro. Retro works for restaurants because I think people have a universal belief that food used to be better. You know,
they used to be cooked in more grease.
Well, grandma's recipe always is the best one, right? Yeah, and they make, they used to use, McDonald's French fries used to be cooked in beef tallow. And they stopped doing it. Now they use vegetable oil, and it tastes so much better if it was in beef tallow.
It definitely, everything tastes better in beef tallow. I mean,
You can see how they carry this retro look throughout. There's this wood planks, kind of rustic wood look. The typography has a certain sort of retro feeling. They've got this old world drawing of a chicken, and they got this little like son of logo, the little egg with the LC. So
I
all the
really
elements
like
work
that
together.
logo.
Yeah. Here's another place, Bone Daddy's restaurant. So would you eat there? What's this place like?
I feel like they'd have artesian beers. I feel
Perhaps.
like there'd be a lot of like that and experimental jazz and that kind of thing. Kind of a experience, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they've got music. What other associations would you have with this? I think I know how to fix my presentation here.
It reminds me of an artist, but I can't remember the name.
It has a look
Uh,
like what I would call primitive art,
yeah,
which is
Like primitive Americana almost.
yes, exactly.
like jazz era.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen a lot of this style down south when I was
Daddy-o.
growing up. And I take it this is also a real place.
Yes. So if you're a vegetarian, they'll let you know that this is not for you, right?
Yeah.
Which is a useful thing because you don't want to advertise something in a way that people don't understand what it is because you have disappointed people.
There would be that one person though that comes in expecting to get a salad.
What do you think of the color palette here? What's being messaged there?
Energy.
Yeah, energy. There's heat, right? Fire, ketchup and mustard, barbecue sauce, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a real simple palette. They've got a very natural paper color. Notice nothing is white in this. There's nothing
It's kind of
stark,
cream.
and even the black feels a little mottled, like it's not just straight black. So that's part of the brand. It's very sort of organic and real and ethnic and all that. So this is not TGI Fridays, right? It lets you know through the brand. All right, here's a beer company called Swing Beer. What's your feeling about Swing Beer? What comes across?
Festive.
Circus.
Yeah. It looks like the circus, right? I think
Yeah.
this very expertly telegraphs the circus, and I don't know what that has to do with beer. So in a way, it's well branded, but it's the wrong brand.
Well, unless they have maybe experimental flavors.
Yeah, like
Maybe
cotton candy and popcorn flavor.
there are some weird things. You actually can get cotton candy beer, the simulated taste, which is just uncomfortably wrong.
Yes, I agree. So
Yeah.
one thing I would say is you can create a very consistent brand, but you have to make sure it's on target with what your product is. Here's Kate Peters Photography. What's her brand about? What's she like?
Maybe very structured.
Yeah. What kind of photography do you think she does?
Babies.
Maybe. You can't tell. This is
Yeah,
this is good design. It's very clean. It looks great, but it doesn't have enough branding to let me know anything about her.
To be honest, if they didn't say photography, I'd think they were something like a hotel.
It could be anything, right? You don't want to be generic. Even if it's good design. I mean, it's clean. It looks really nice, but it's not telling me much about what she does. Here's an identity package. I'll just go through this and sort of give you the idea of what you're designing. So a letterhead, envelope, business card, and this is a note card envelope. So on the letterhead, remember that a letterhead is really a frame for a letter. It's a written letter that's going to be printed in black on here. So don't make this full of graphics and things because it'll interfere with the type that necessarily goes there. The logo is sort of the hero. You want to make that front and center somehow. So you've worked really hard on it. Make it work. It's the hero. The other information is organized and out of the way. It has a clean kind of look in this example. The back of this page is a flood color, which is a cool thing to do. It gives it more branding. The envelope, the logo stands alone. Probably the return address and everything is on the back flap. The business card logo is the #1 thing. Then the person's name and title, and they're set off a bit from everything else. And then the rest of the information is organized and kind of out of the way. They're using the icon by itself on the back, which is a cool thing. You could do that. And then this is a note envelope. Here's another one. This is an architect as well. Finkel Williams, and they have this sort of FW icon, which they're embossing without ink, which is called blind embossing down here in the bottom. Logo, this distinctive yellow color really kind of makes things pop out. On the business card, they're using the full logo on the back, but not on the front. That's okay, you could do that as well. So the person's name and title and information is all right there, and it's sort of embossed as well. So that embossing becomes a thing. You can simulate embossing with Photoshop if you want to. Lucky Bucket Brewing, so this has a sort of wax seal with an LB. They've got this ribbon element. So it's going beyond just the logo and thinking about using color and graphic elements, paper texture. This is sort of a cream color paper. All these things contribute to the branded look. Here's another one. This is the Motion 504 out in Minnesota. So they've got this sort of rustic woodsman kind of feeling for a video production company, which is kind of funny. But they very cleverly used existing materials like manila envelope and this chipboard case, but put stickers on, and the fact that it's not centered and it's kind of crooked, that's all part of the look of it, right? Interesting color palette. This kind of warm woodsy brown, a little bit of sky blue. Here's another one. Club Noble. So this is very fancy and has a lot of gold foil and little elements. There's a wonderful subtle border going around the edge. That's sort of a floral pattern. All these things contribute to the look and feel of the identity package. Capture Studios, they're using a pattern here, and the pattern sort of wraps the business card. They've got these 3 icons for their logo, and they use them horizontally or vertically. They put the return address and stuff, all that information vertically. That's okay, you can do that. It's kind of different. Carthage Stonework. So this is a very sort of retro look with the black and white photography. They have these icons that are like red stamps that look like old Union logos from the turn of the 20th century. All that sort of retro look kind of fits with the stonework idea. And they've used this paper color. What does that paper look like? What color is it?
Grayish.
It's gray because it's stone, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that can relate. The paper color is another element. Here's a dentist. They're having some fun. There's like this beautiful blue mouthwash color. They've got a retro look. The type has a sort of serious all caps feeling, but they're saying funny things, right? To try to make you, disarm you from being at the dentist. I like this set. This is for Charleston Naturally, so Charleston, South Carolina. This nice logo looks like a crane, but it's actually 2 leaves. And you can see they're using this soft green color. It's in the background here. And this element of just several lines, curved lines, what does that look like to you?
Water.
Yeah, it's like the water in Charleston Bay. So it's
That's
real
cool.
Yeah, a simple element that gives you sparks your imagination. Stand them upright and suddenly it's like seagrass, right?
Yeah.
They use this really well on the business card. When you look at the business card, it's blind embossed. So kind of, Dan, I don't know what you're doing, but it's noisy.
Sorry.
Blind embossed, so printed without ink, like embossed. And the paper texture is very natural looking. So these are the things you're going to think about as you design your identity package. Business card could have all this stuff, but you want to simplify it down to the key elements: the person's name and title, the logo will be the company name, address, phone number, email, web address, kind of organized and out of the way. Don't do a lot of fancy stuff with type and shadows and all kinds of effects. You want to be very clear-minded about what your brand is and how it's represented visually. Letterhead, 8.5 by 11. You're going to have a template for all this. Envelope, this is a number 10 business envelope. It gets a stamp up here. The post office prints a barcode here. So if you put a design here, they'll put a white sticker over it so they can print their barcode. The back flap, you can put the return address here. Some people put a little stamp or like a sticker or something there. Letterhead gets the logo, the address, the phone numbers, the web address. Envelope, logo, address, maybe the web address. And this is a template which you're going to use, and there's a video showing you exactly how to use this template. This page of the template, this artboard, has a ready to assemble envelope. So if you wanted to print and assemble your own envelopes, you could use this template, but you do not need to use this template for this class, for this project. We're sort of giving this to you as an additional element to take with you. I actually have used this. I used it recently for custom printed envelopes for a client. So when you work on your identity package, you will stumble into the world of color because you need to use color in there, and you got to think about your color palette. You're going to do this exercise, which is in the identity package or in the presentation template. It's really just to get you started thinking about your assigned color and what it relates to, but you do not have to use any of these colors in your final color palette. You don't have to stick with one of these relationships. You could say, well, I like pentagram, but I don't like this red, so I'm going to change it to something else. Or you could ignore this altogether. This is really sort of getting you started. It's a simple thing to do as just part of what you're doing. And then you're going to identify your color palette. So you're going to do this at the end, really, when you're completed, you've got your designs, they look great, you're really happy with them. You're going to then what we call spec out your colors. So you figure out what the Pantone equivalent is of what you've decided to use. Then figure out the CMYK, and lastly, you're going to do the RGB values. This is standard procedure to supply a client with all these values. So I want you to do this as part of this assignment to become a professional designer. It may seem counterintuitive, but you should start with Pantone and work your way up. The reason for that is that Pantone has less colors than the other two. The least amount of colors are in Pantone, then comes CMYK, and RGB has the most colors. If you do it the other way, you can easily create an RGB color that doesn't exist in either of these other two, and that's problematic. So start with Pantone, CMYK, and then RGB. Now, you notice there are 5 colors here, right? You must have 5 colors in your color palette. You may say, well, my logo only uses 2. Well, that doesn't matter. I want you to create a 5-color palette, and you will use those 5 colors as you go forward in all your pieces. You cannot have black or white in your palette. I'm going to go through that again. 5 colors, no black, no white. You'll get a lot of points off for using black and white as part of your palette. Start with your 10 keywords that are supplied in your creative brief and look at your color palette. And if it says, if your keywords are things like bold, strong, powerful, all this stuff, and then your color palette is all pastels, maybe you're not on track, right? And vice versa. 5 colors is what you got to use. These are the levers of color that you're going to be manipulating to get an interesting color palette: hue, saturation, brightness, and temperature. You remember doing this in your hero portrait. Now you're going to use it to create a color palette for your identity. The hue, only one of the hues is assigned to you. The rest of the other 4 are up to you. Do you have some that are desaturated, some that are darker, some that have a warmer temperature. Here, I'm going to go back to this palette and show you something. So this is a student palette, and there's some strategy here. This is their assigned color, this blue, and this is actually the complement, but a sort of tint of the complement, not a straight up complement. This is a darker shade of the complement, and this is an even darker shade of the complement. And then this is the same color, but with the brightness taken down. So there's a bit of a strategy there. You want to have a variation of hue and a variation in value, light and dark. You know, if you do letterhead, you want to have a light background. You may want to have darker elements to stand out. Type and things like that may need to be darker on a lighter background. So think about how you're creating some contrast, and have 5 colors and no black and white. All right. So how do you get inspiration? Look at nature. Look at things related to your product. Look at great photography. As I said at the beginning of this course, our goal is to turn you into a lifelong student of color. So you should be looking at all kinds of things and noticing how color is being used in art, in fashion. This is the Oscars from 2018, I believe. Yeah, 2018. Anybody know why they're all in black?
I
Nope.
assume maybe because it's impressive to be able to do that many things with black, but no idea.
They are in black for the Me Too movement. It was the Time's Up protest.
Oh, cool.
Now it's still Hollywood, so there's some bling, there's some metallics, some lace, some leather. There's interesting things going on in fashion all the time, and you should be sort of being aware of it. This is the 2019 Golden Globes. Color came back.
That's more colorful.
Yes. But dark, kind of somber colors in a way, a little bit, with one exception.
Holy
Usually
shit.
the exception, isn't she?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was actually gonna say almost like natural colors for the other ones, and that's just like Disney Princess.
Well, she clearly likes to make a statement, and I think that
No.
there was part of the strategy was, how does it look on red? It really
Oh,
popped out. It definitely was a distinctive color. It stood out as
that is a very good point.
yeah. So there's stuff going on all around you all the time that I want you to notice. This, I think, was this year's Oscars. She went with black.
Nice to see more variety, to be honest.
Yeah, metallics are interesting. There's a lot of metallics and interesting things going on with that. This is the 2020 Oscars. Monochromatic. It's interesting. A little splash of red. But I see a lot more interesting use of metallics in fashion.
Also shape.
Yes,
With the
interesting
colors.
shapes. Our friend Matisse said, when I put colors together, they have to join a living chord, like a musical chord or harmony. What he's talking about is creating a palette. You know, that's a bunch of colors working together. He loved color. He used lots of bright colors. He lived in a part of the world where they had the Mediterranean. But certainly as a prolific artist, he is known for his use of color. This painting is by Andrew Wyeth. Have anybody seen this painting before?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a famous painting. It's at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Different use of color, right, than Matisse.
It's almost a photograph.
Well, it's winter in Maine, or it's like sort of winter grass in Maine. This painting is mostly used as an example of dynamic composition because the horizon line is super high up, and her figure is just sort of pointing toward the farmhouse like this. But I want you to look at what?
Who did this?
Andrew Wyeth.
Oh, Andrew Wyeth, same guy.
1948.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So it's painted on wood board, and I think he just took the back of a brush and just scraped to make the grass. But look at the color in the grass. There's an enormous amount of color. Orange, green, a little bit of blue, these tints of brown. You can see there's this undulating, wonderful color that really breathes life into this otherwise dead grass. You know, some people just look out and say, well, it's brown. Not brown. There's a lot going on there. This is a painting by Albert Bierstadt, who was a German immigrant, came to the United States and went out west and painted these amazing scenes of the American West. He was part of a painting movement called the Hudson River School. And one of the things they did, which was create this sort of luminosity on the canvas. Before the days of electric light, this just seemed to glow to people off the canvas. It has an amazing kind of light to it. But his paintings are like 15 feet tall, they're huge, and they really inspired people to move out west. This is another one. This is his Domes of Yosemite. And if you look at Yosemite, it looks just like this right now. They've kept it pretty the same. Gauguin, a French painter. He was a bank teller until the age of 40, and then decided to become a painter and moved to Tahiti. Did these amazing paintings. Another part of the Impressionist movement, and you can see this wood boards. This is under covered light, but all the bounce colors, violet, turquoise, orange, yellow, a little bit of green on the feet, really sort of emphasizing the bounce color that he would see in these scenes. I love these mangoes. Mangoes are so wonderful to paint because they're complementary colors. They go from red to green in a sort of magical way. So think about your own inspiration. Look at other people's work. See things that are in your category. Think about how you're going to accent your assigned color and make it stand out. Think about the relationship of the colors. You know, some are going to be backgrounds and some are going to be foregrounds. They're like a family. We talk about hierarchy in design, and typically that means the biggest thing on the page is the thing you pay attention to. But in color, the smallest thing can be the thing that has the hierarchy that you pay attention to. This is the work of Jessica Hische, type designer. She's a wonderful type letterer, custom lettering. You can create drama and create attention using color only. Experiment. You have tools to enable you to build many, many color palettes. So try lots of different things before you settle down. Make it interesting. So this is another Jessica Hische piece. If you think about it, this is orange, purple, and green would be a secondary triadic, but instead it's this blue that's sort of a periwinkle blue, like just stands out. A red, blue, and yellow would be a primary triadic, but instead of yellow, it's this light green, kind of interesting. Another piece by Jessica Hische, Matilda. So this background is not black, but it's like a chalkboard, like a blackboard in her terrible school, and all the bright colors contrast with that to create the magic that was Matilda. You can use colors to signify flavors and organize things. If you look at these, even if you couldn't read, you could sort of tell what they taste like, right? From the color. They're using a principle here of keeping a very consistent structure on each of the labels and then changing out the color. So if you're changing out one thing, it creates a sort of visual hierarchy as well. Same thing with these bottles of wine. Different varieties from different colors. Coffee, different varieties, different colors. And then you're going to, when you get it all figured out, you're going to start with your Pantones, then CMYK, and then RGB. And I showed you that. This is another piece by Jessica Heish. Wonderful gradient from orange to blue without turning to mud in the middle. It feels like the blue is just being warmed up a little bit on the edges. Well done sort of gradient. You can see how the black becomes very active in this design. Hue, saturation, brightness, and temperature. I can't say it enough. These are the levers. I want you to change them up. If you have a palette that is all the same brightness, that is not good. That's not going to work for you. If you have, you wouldn't obviously have all the same hue, or you could, but it would be a monochromatic palette, but switch it up a little bit. Play with all these attributes to make sure that you have enough variety to create all the elements you need to do. So I'm just going to go back over to the example I had, Zinnia T, which was Christina's. So if you look at this, her keywords, she did this experiment with the color. This is where we're at today. And looked at all these color palettes. Didn't actually end up using any of those, just went with her own palette. So she was assigned this yellow color and she went for this blue. But you see there's variety. So this yellow color by itself is kind of a light value, but she went even lighter value, a mid-tone of green, a nice stone gray, and a dark blue, like a darker blue. So there's variety in hue, variety in saturation, variety in brightness. And then her elements work pretty well together. You see how that stone blue kind of works really well as a paper color. And there's the whole package. So this is what you're aiming for the week. So that's my lecture for tonight. Does anyone have any questions?
So we just picked one of the icons out of the three that we already the week before we put on the business cards and stuff. We picked one of those three.
Yes, you're going to pick your best logo. If you want input from me, I can do that. I'm on Slack all day long. So if you find me on Slack and you just say, can you look at this? I'll look at it. I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
I will be grading everything from week 2 in the next couple of days, but I may not get to everybody super fast, as fast as you need. So if you want one-on-one feedback right away, let me know and I'll do that.
Okay.
That was a good question. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Well, the color that we were assigned, the one color, we can change.
So the way it works is you have your assigned color, and these colors, these other 4, are totally up to you. They can be any colors you want.
Okay.
If your brand is like super serious and hardcore, like maybe it's all gonna inform your design decisions in terms of color and stuff. Like I said, if you have like all pastels and your brand is really bold and strong and stuff, probably you're in the wrong realm of color. Is that helpful, Sharon?
Yeah.
All right.
Do we have to make that the color we were given, use that as a main color in our logo?
It should be featured prominently in some way.
Okay.
That's your goal. If you see in hers, it is kind of a dominant color. But she had to come up with a darker blue to make it stand out. If everything was like cream colored, this would just all blend in like camouflage. Any other questions? All right, guys. Well, I'm glad you could all join me. I'm going to stop the recording.